China is still the biggest threat to the United States.
China poses the most consequential threat to the nation's national security.
China.
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 I mean, China is planning to go to war. Xi Jinping doesn't stop talking about it.
China. It's a question we've been confronted with constantly through our media. What would happen if the United States and China were to go to war? Two nuclear superpowers in a global struggle for dominance. It's a question that's unthinkable, yet each year we grow closer and closer to that possibility. We're bombarded with these war scenarios. Who would win? Are we prepared? But what I want to know is why? Why would we go to war with China? And what would it accomplish?
The 4 new military bases that will be used by American forces will be scattered around the Philippines. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. says the expanded access will include sites close to Taiwan and in Palawan province near the South China Sea. This will effectively give the United States a front row seat to China's activities in the region.
In 2023, the United States made plans to build 4 new military bases in the Philippines, adding to the 5 previous locations. The bases will be built on the northern tip of the Philippines and happen to be facing directly towards China's front door, the hotly contested South China Sea.
Enraging China, who has repeatedly accused Washington of trying to encircle and contain Beijing.
When we pull back the timeline, we can see this effort to fill the Pacific Island chains with American military is not isolated to the Philippines. In fact, it almost looks like the United States is making an overt effort to surround China with the United States military. It becomes even more strange when you look at a map and you realize that there are no Chinese military bases even close to the United States border. Let's take a look at how many foreign military bases the US has. That's right, 742 in 82 countries and territories. The United States military claims that we are encircling China in a strategy of deterrence. However, the question must be asked, when a country from the other side of the world starts arming your neighbors and building an army outside of your gate, does that send a message of peace or hostility? It becomes even more dicey when you add Taiwan to the mix, which of course you have to, because if there were ever a spark to ignite World War III, it would be that island off the coast of China. An island that's got something the entire world's economy is reliant on. Microchips, the new cash crop. Taiwan produces over 60% of the world's semiconductors and over 90% of the advanced microchips, which require an incredibly specialized form of manufacturing, which only a few companies in the world are capable of. This leaves Taiwan not only geographically strategic as a point in control of the South China Sea, but also an invaluable economic powerhouse. The US fears that if China were to control Taiwan, then they would have an increased sphere of influence on the rest of the Pacific and pose a threat to other nations of interest. The separation of Taiwan from mainland China, a legacy of the Chinese Civil War and colonial era, remains an unresolved issue, as both the People's Republic of China, the PRC, and Republic of China, ROC, claim to be the legitimate government of all China. While the mainland prefers peaceful reunification, it doesn't rule out force, and the US offering military support to Taiwan has escalated tensions to a boiling point. But would the United States really risk nuclear fallout over a foreign conflict across the world? Well, let's look at the United States military's track record. Let's go back to April 30th, 1975, the fall of Saigon.
I came here to speak to you about Vietnam. I do not have to tell you that our people are profoundly concerned about that struggle.
Was the American war on the people of Vietnam successful? 2 million civilians were killed in the territories of North and South Vietnam, along with Laos and Cambodia. The highly toxic chemical dioxin, known as Agent Orange, deployed by the US military, has affected around 3 million Vietnamese citizens, causing horrific birth defects. These birth defects continue to plague the families of Vietnamese people, and United States veterans, leaving a lingering legacy of U.S. involvement in foreign affairs. Let's jump to 2001.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
After 9/11, the world was with us to steer a course of peace and justice. Our decision instead was a path of arbitrary violence as we attacked not Saudi Arabia, who supplied the 9/11 terrorists, but the people and land of Afghanistan. Then we lied about Iraq as a threat to the US and invaded and killed hundreds of thousands.
Iraq's weapons of mass destruction are controlled by a murderous tyrant.
You lied about weapons of mass destruction. You lied about connections to 9/11. You lied about Iraq being a threat. You sent me to Iraq. You sent me to Iraq in 2003. My friends are dead. Joshua Castile. You killed people. You lied. 1 million Iraqis are dead because you lied.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere.
We tossed aside human rights and diplomacy as we resorted to torture and even encouraged Middle Eastern fighters to form new terrorist groups, resulting in a destruction of the region and a total failure in the US war on terror. An estimated 37 million refugees in the Middle East were created from our so-called effort to make America secure. The buildup of military bases and allies in the Pacific mirrors the US military strategy to enlarge NATO and use militarism rather than diplomacy and economic cooperation with Russia. This has led the world to the cusp of nuclear war in World War III. Hindsight is 2020, but we are currently watching as defense contractors, better known as merchants of death, and their paid political supporters in the US House and Senate are bringing us down a path to a US-led war in China. The United States has proven that we are willing to wage war abroad in order to increase our economic and ideological influence. Now the United States and China are engaged in a struggle for economic dominance, with the main stage taking place in Taiwan. However, China is also interested in increasing their economic sphere of influence outside of the Pacific. President Xi Jinping started the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013, which is one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects ever conceived, creating railroads and ports in developing countries from Latin America to Africa. It is often compared to the ancient Silk Road trade route, but this new Silk Road has become intercontinental, significantly broadening China's economic and political influence. President Biden and his advisors fear that China will use militarism to expand into countries dominated by Western capitalism. China, however, is not sending troops into the Belt and Road Initiative countries, where they are building seaports and railroads. This has never been the strategy of the People's Republic of China. This type of military-backed economic expansion that the United States fears, ironically, is the very same strategy that the United States used on the people of China in the past. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the United States referred to their business with China as China trade. Tea and silk were the commodities most often noted, but the key item in the 19th century was opium. The British in 1837 did battle with the Chinese to force China to accept opium as a key trade item. The profits from opium were so great that American merchants became involved. Harvard, Yale, and Princeton were heavily financed by the profits made from opium and exploiting the Chinese people. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt did not live his high-style life from the US government salaries. His grandfather was Warren Delano, who as a major US official in China, traded in opium and passed on his wealth to allow grandchildren to have yachts and magnificent homes. When a Chinese organization revolted against the foreigners, the United States and other foreign governments sent in troops to put down these secret societies labeled the Boxers. The Boxers were defeated, and China was forced to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to the invading foreign governments, which impoverished the Chinese government and humiliated the country. The memory of Western troops invading mainland China has not been erased from China's memory. China's military growth in recent decades can be understood best as a response, not a provocation. China, to their credit, has realized that military violence is not the answer to economic success. No other country in history has been able to pull out millions of its citizens from poverty, as has the People's Republic of China. China leads the world in electric car production and has high-speed passenger railroads. The US can't even afford to upgrade its public transport system, let alone house the homeless, or take care of the veterans that we sent off to these wars. All the while, we spend billions upon billions of dollars waging wars in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, especially now as we gear up for war with China. As we near the end of this video, I find an answer to my original question. Why would we go to war with China, and what would it accomplish? The answer is simple. We would go to war because of fear. Fear that China will become more powerful than the United States. And what would it accomplish? 2 nuclear powers at war? Well, if we live to see the outcome, I'd guess we'd accomplish filling the pockets of the war makers and creating enough destabilization to continue this endless cycle of war. But we can break this cycle. Stop appeasing the merchants of death who profit from antagonizing China. We need to focus instead on real human needs in health, education, housing, transportation, ensuring the right to clean water, air, soil, and agriculture. Imagine what our infrastructure could be, what our environment could look like when we focus on a vision of peace. It's time to take back our country from the merchants of death. Share this video, start conversations, and support organizations that advocate campaign finance reform. Together, let's build a future where politics prioritizes peace over profit. Debate this video with friends, professors, students. Start conversations over a coffee or drink. Show it at meetings or after religious services. Join the movement for a fair and accountable democracy. Your voice matters, and change starts here.